In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. War broke out in heaven. Of all the strange, wondrous sights and sounds John experienced in his revelatory vision, nothing could be more puzzling. Yes, we wonder over the obscure symbols and metaphors John uses, attempting to contain in human language a reality that mere words cannot fully express. And some people obsess over how to decipher the meaning of those. And we're also fascinated by the intense glory of the scene and struggle to imagine its immaculate brightness, full of color, perfect in proportion. Not to mention the strange creatures who attend the throne of God, some of whom are rather frightful in appearance. But nothing is more striking in the vision than those relatively straightforward yet scandalous words, "War broke out in heaven." When we think of heaven, and rightly so, we think of a realm of perfect peace in the presence of a God who is love. John wrote extensively about the joyous, ecstatic worship of God offered by human and angel alike, a worship in which we share in some measure. At our Eucharist, as we prepare to make holy the bread and wine, we sing with angels and archangels and with all the company of heaven, "Holy, holy, holy." Elsewhere, an elder explained to John that this unending worship arises in part from the gratitude of those who once suffered horribly for the faith, but who now know no pain, whose tears are wiped from their cheeks by the very hand of God. So how, why would any creature rebel against God, this beautiful life everlasting, and attempt to take over? What reasonable objection could be made? What could possibly motivate part of the angelic host? For that is who the dragon, the devil, Satan and his horde were, angels. Why would they wage a war they had to know that, among other things, was unwinnable? A war, therefore, started solely out of spite. Most people think it's about pride. The same sort of pride that we show when we think we know better than God how to live our lives. As the ancient saying goes, as above, so below, and vice versa. So maybe pride is the reason. But evil, that force personified by those rebellious angels, evil is a lot more subtle than that. It does not just come out and rage treason against God. Evil whispers. Evil implies. It lies to get its way and to gain sway over God's beloved creatures and corrupt us into something unrecognizable, violent, fearful, vicious, cruel, heartless, mean, greedy. Yes, the battle continues and always will until that final day when God's inevitable triumph comes and the whole cosmos is made holy once more. In the meantime, each September 29th, we pause to give God thanks and praise for Saint Michael and all angels, for our guardian protectors who fought and still fight against the dragon, however and wherever that wicked beast chooses to manifest itself. Angels guide us onto the pathway of faith, seeking to provoke from within us the better angels of our nature, as Abraham Lincoln once put it. And the angels of God who serve him loyally do so much more, as we well know, occupying a host of roles. They bring comfort and strength and hope to exhausted and discouraged prophets like Elijah. who battled against the corrupt and idolatrous leaders of his time who threatened his life. Elijah had given up and gone to the wilderness to die, but the angels came to him with food and water to sustain him on his way. Angels also reach out to rascals like Jacob, who don't really deserve it, which was the whole point. Those chosen by God to fulfill his purposes never deserve that. Grace doesn't work like that. Instead, grace received with humility transforms the undeserving into people who can act as agents of God's purposes, not merely their own desires. Angels are also messengers that bring good news into the darkness of our world. They visited shepherds in the fields at night and sang of a newly born baby come to bring life and rebirth to all. Angels like Gabriel approached Mary with a rather audacious piece of information. Mary, God's picked you to bear the Son of God, the Messiah. Are you in or are you out? And when Jesus was at risk from the evil King Herod, who wanted to hold on to power more than anything else, angels came to Joseph in dreams and said, "Get out of here, quick, go to Egypt." In the wilderness, after Jesus met the test of temptation, angels tended to him, and in the Garden of Gethsemane, as he faced the agony of betrayal and torture to come, the angels were there with him too. And when the women came to anoint Jesus' body in the tomb on the third day, angels met them there to confirm the truth that their eyes could not believe and to give them instructions on where they might find the risen Christ. And greatest of all, angels act as harbingers of God's presence. Jacob dreamed of a ladder with angels ascending and descending, but they were just the prelude, because then God stood beside Jacob and spoke words of great promise for him and for many future generations. When Mary said yes to Gabriel, she simultaneously said yes to God, and God's presence conceived within her something so great that we still cannot conceive of it. When angels arrive, God usually is not far behind. Of course, we need to be mindful that not everything is all sweetness and light when it comes to angels. Our culture portrays them as creatures of mercy, which they are. But our culture also portrays them as creatures who are easy to interact with, which is not always the case. In the Bible, when angels arrived, they consistently told people, "Don't be afraid. It's okay. Don't be afraid. Calm down. Don't be afraid." And for good reason. It wasn't just because of their otherworldly appearance, although that would be plenty. It was that people knew enough to know that if an angel paid you a visit, your life was about to change, probably in a radical and risky way, if you accepted the commission they brought from God. And if one were to reject that calling, to refuse the reality of what was happening and rebel against God, then woe be unto you. So if an angel drops by to chat, be prepared for a great blessing, but also a potentially dreadful experience. They might even have eyes all over their bodies. Yet we welcome them. We welcome their protection and guidance, their messages and comfort, and the challenging summons they bring from God. For in angels we see an example of noble obedience. We would be wise to follow, because in noble obedience we are free. In the presence of angels we are brought closer to the glory of God, and when they come, it is always to advance the cause of love, without which the world would be a living hell. Of course, there are some among us who have never seen an angel, either waking or sleeping, or felt their presence in some other way. Perhaps we were unaware or unprepared, or perhaps an angel hasn't paid a visit yet. Please don't worry about that. Not every person in the Bible, for that matter, not every person of consequence in the Bible, had an encounter with an angel, because it's not always necessary. Angels are emissaries, mediators between God and people, and sometimes God just chooses the direct approach, unmediated by his heavenly servants. So those who receive angels are no better or worse than those who don't, and those who don't are not better or worse than those who do. As a very small child, I dreamed of an angel who stood there and said nothing. I have deduced over time that I must have a guardian angel, paid lots of overtime with many vacation days piled up, because in my younger years I did many foolish things, mainly involving ignoring speedometers, that without a guardian to protect me, I should have died in my teens or early 20s. Some people would call that luck. I call him by another name. Whatever the case, in terms of our experience with angels, war broke out in heaven. And the instigators were cast out and thrust down to earth, where they diligently continue their efforts to undo God's good creation, causing chaos and discord, injustice and corruption, and above all, deceit. Theirs is ultimately a futile quest, and the forces of evil know that, but are most eager to work hard to take down as many of us as they can with them, purely out of spite. But we are not helpless in this fight. Angels defend us. Yet they also call us at God's behest to fight beside them, not as glorious heroes, but as humble servants. For if in the struggle against evil, against deceit and malice and pride and greed, if we sit complacent, content to be safe as the war rages on, then it's hard to see how we can be counted as allies of God. And if not allies, then how could we be counted among the communion of saints in which the heavenly host takes part? We have a choice to make, just as Mary and Joseph and Elijah and Jacob and Jesus and countless others have throughout the millennia. In one way, it is a hard choice because it involves sacrifice. So many have been seduced by the lies, by the violence, the corruption, and they will resist every effort to tamp out that evil on this earth. But in another way, it is not a hard choice. Because if John's revelation is clear about one thing, and his revelation is unclear about a lot of things, if his revelation is clear about one thing, it's this: whatever we might lose or suffer for the sake of the gospel is worth it. We already know who wins in the end. And deep in our hearts, we also know that the fight beside angels for God, to fight beside angels for love and hope and peace and joy and freedom and truth, to fight beside angels is the greatest honor any of us will ever know.